Should be coming back online shortly. No idea why it did that. Sorry to anybody that's watching. For no apparent reason, Twitch just dropped the channel and it automatically reconnected. I hadn't dropped and still haven't dropped any frames whatsoever. It was a controlled drop from Twitch. It actually was a full sort of go away and come back, which is kind of weird. So sorry about that, everybody. Unfortunately, something outside of my control. It's possibly, well, I'm using currently the Amsterdam ingest server because London seems to be causing people some problems. Yesterday some people were having difficulty watching with buffering problems, so I thought I'd use one of the continental ingests this evening and see if that was anybody that watched, if they also had a problem or whether it's gone away. Don't surprise me a little, that. I think yeah, it's only the second time Twitch has ever disconnected me. Okay, I'm doing the back now of the pussycat. I think I will just give myself a little bit of an indication where the fur comes down. Yeah, about there. Thank you anyway. I'm sorry about that, Lizard, and anybody who's watching. Anybody who is watching who feels they'd like to join in the conversation, please do so. I don't think Lizard Soul nor myself would object to that. You're quite welcome to join us. Conversation does seem to often revolve around crafts and craft working, but I don't know. I don't play many games, but I'm sure Lizard Soul does. Lots of people on Twitch seem to play lots of games. I play a few, but not a fantastic amount of games, and mine tend not to be the games which seem to excite people on Twitch, like World of Warcraft or things like that. I don't particularly have an interest in, so I'm more simulator or adventure game based, the things that I enjoy playing. So what plans of things have you what have I played lately? It's been a while actually, because I don't have a great deal of games, as I mentioned. On Steam I've probably got only about 20, if that, and some of those are games that I've played before, and I've just got them on Twitch, so that on Steam, so that I can play them again, like Myst, for example. And there's at least one of those Cyan games which I never actually finished, so I think I've got that on Steam in order to do it. So the game I played last was probably Farming Simulator. I kind of enjoy playing that, and I can play that for days. I don't know quite what it is, but I find that an enjoyable game. But this outside of that, Talos Principle, which is sort of a puzzle game. Yeah, the Myst series, absolutely fantastic. I've played all of the Myst series, and they did try and do an online version, which I took part in, which was quite took part of. I purchased the online version, and unfortunately got shut down, and has actually now gone. I won't say it's gone open source, but it's gone fan supported, shall we say. And I've not actually played it since then, which is kind of weird, because there was something because the Myst games, you don't shoot anything, and the online version was a puzzle game, and you, in some cases, you had to cooperate with other people to solve puzzles, and it was an absolutely fantastic experience, really. And if Myst, you're familiar with the images, and the online stuff was of the same sort of vein, and it was almost the night they shut the servers down. There were literally hundreds of people online in the gathering areas, just stood there, just looking around and just waiting for the point where the server it went dark, the lights went out, and the servers went dark. And it was an amazingly emotional evening, really. I can't say whether you do enjoy it, because I think it takes. I want to say it takes an exceptional person. That's the wrong thing. There are, certain people do not like that sort of game, and other people love them. If you're the sort of person that likes that sort of puzzle game, which is, and the puzzles aren't always that obvious, then you'll absolutely love it. If that sort of thing frustrates you, it'll drive you potty. But the Myst and the I've forgotten what the other ones are now. I think there's 5 in the series, and then you get into what would be the single player version of the online, although the online's not there anymore, and the expansion packs that were for that as well. If you like that sort of game, you are in for a treat. Kind of would suggest, don't save them up for too long. Have a play with them. They're not. You're unlikely to finish them within sort of days, unless you've got an exceptional mind, which you may well have. It actually can take days and weeks with the Myst series to be able to solve the puzzles. And one of the things about them is when you know the answers, and it's easy to forget, by the way. If I play it now, I'm starting again from scratch, even though I've played it at least twice, the Myst. When you know the answers, it's obvious, and it's kind of so simple, but it wasn't until you knew the answers, and it's real good stuff. But any sort of adventure game like that, I love playing. Got a few of the point and click ones. Sometimes they're a bit. Some point and click ones I like. Some point and click ones I don't. With those sorts of adventure games, it's the story which grabs your attention and keeps you playing, and that's kind of important for me to pick up one of those sorts of games. Daft thing is, I say I don't play shooting games particularly, but things like Doom, the original Doom, and Doom 2, Doom 3, which are all 90% of that is shooting, but that's also kind of a puzzle adventure game as well. You have to go find the secret rooms or the secret switches, and I really enjoy those. So, Duke Nukem series, the Serious Sam series, that sort of thing. Okay. That's a bit of a difficult one. You could look at it as if you play them, and it might improve your mood, if you like, and therefore you just feel better all round. Yeah. Some fantastic puzzles. Some of them are audio based though, so if you have no I won't say tone deaf, but if you have trouble distinguishing different audio notes, then the Scion games can be a little challenging because some of those are have sound-based clues. But yeah, Tellus one it's interesting. It's a straight puzzle game set in a nice environment. Or the amount that I've played so far. I've watched quite a bit of it on stream, and so I'm kind of saving Talos Principle until I've forgotten quite as much as I've watched on stream, because I kind of watched quite a few people playing it, and it sort of intrigued me enough to want to play it myself, and then I stopped watching because obviously I don't really want to spoil for myself having to solve the puzzles. While watching people on stream, I was trying to work out how to solve it, and a couple of streamers I was watching were encouraging people to help them solve it. So I sort of took part in doing that, but so that's kind of to one side now to play when I've forgotten about it. I always found that, daft as it sounds, I can tell. I play music, or have played music. I can read music. I can play some musical instruments, but I always found the sound puzzles hard. Mainly because I think I'd have found them easier if I'd put headphones on. Thinking about it, so mainly because they're so short. There's other sounds going on, and it was difficult sometimes to actually hear them particularly well. But yeah. Now we go that way, right? So, but yes, any sort of puzzle game like that, even in real life, I kind of like adventure. So no, that gives a wrong impression. If there's a castle, I love exploring around a castle. If there is public caves, I love exploring around public caves. I'm not a caver though, and I don't like the idea of cave. Don't mind other people doing caving, but I don't like the idea of caving. I don't like the idea of squeezing into really tight spots that you may not actually be able to get out of. Although I know the principle is if you can get in, you can get out. But some of the things where some of the cavers are going through what's called presses, gaps which are they've got to breathe in to actually get through, that sort of thing. And I'm not particularly claustrophobic, but that I think would trigger it. Yeah. But I like simulators a lot as well. Train simulator, flight simulator, although I don't play that one at the moment. So Microsoft Flight Simulator, Dovetail Games, Train Simulator. I've got the other one as well. The Euro Truck Simulator, and Flight Simulator. So the four there. I enjoy playing those there. I know they're not realistic, but they are realistic enough, and I find them quite fun to play as well. But there again, truck simulation, even trains for that matter. I just like things with lots of wheels. Weird thing, lots of wheels, and I love it. Not quite sure what that's about or why, but so You know, the articulated trucks. He fascinates me. Trains, lots of wheels. So that kind of fascinates me. There are heavy lift machinery things which have got sort of, they're like I suppose I can't really describe what they are, but they've got sort of about 100 wheels on the things, and they fascinate me. I'd love to make a model of one of those things one of these days. Just wheels. Not many wheels in Farming Simulator, but I actually learnt how to drive on a tractor. So I don't know if that's got anything to do with the fact that I like Farming Simulator. It wasn't on a farm even though, but maybe just driving a tractor came from that, or maybe not. I don't actually know. But I do love playing that sort of game with an actual physical controller. So the truck simulator with a wheel and pedals, and I think I mentioned this the other night. So the train simulator with something that represents a throttle. If I play the flight simulator, I'd love to get the yoke, the control yoke and the aircraft pedals to play that with as well. It just seems more real when you do that than using a mouse to click a steering wheel or something like that. So I've been fascinated with, I call that physical computing. I've been fascinated with that for years. I am a licensed radio amateur, and a long time ago, once when I'd built my own, one of the modes that amateurs can use is a teletype. It's a typewriter type machine, if it's not something you're familiar with, which you type at one end of a communications link and it comes out at the other, and vice versa. So it's the sort of two typewriters linked together, and whilst those sorts of things are all electronic these days, when I was doing it years and years ago, they were all mechanical, spinning motors and rotors and gears and everything else. And when I built my first computer, I linked it up to the teletype, so the teletype would act like a printer. And the very first day I actually connected the wires, I was writing machine code by hand, and all it did was energize a relay that was in the teletype machine, and it was just going click, 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 and I spent almost an hour just doing that, and I was absolutely fascinated by it. And I think that's probably where my interest in mechanical computing comes from. It's Lewis Therin Thelamon. That's an interesting name. Welcome to the stream. Thank you very much for following. That's most kind of you. I'm glad it's proving to be entertaining for you. I'm not sure if that's the discussion on adventure games and physical computing or the pyrography that you're watching, but welcome to the stream, and feel free to join in. Passion, yes, probably. I know being able to just flip that relay, because something happened, it spurred on doing a lot more and a lot more to do with it, and I was eventually able to program that computer that I built to replace the teletype itself, so I didn't have a large noisy clanking machine in my bedroom, which is where I used to do it, which actually meant I could practice or communicate using that mode at 2 o'clock in the morning when everybody was in bed, which I couldn't have done before. Teletypes are loud. So I'm doing the black fur on the back of the pussycat here. What I intend to do is You might just see it on the reference image. There's like a halo, a white halo around here. That's because some of the fur around his neck is actually white, and some of it's sticking out a little bit. Now, what I could do with that is do it all with black fur, and then scrape it away. What I'm actually probably going to do is just do a light. As you can see here at the moment, it's light area. I'll probably bring this a bit closer to the area of fur here, but just leave it slightly light. It will actually achieve the same effect, but without needing to do the after processing of scratching away the colour. Scallion, good evening. Were any trees harmed in the making of this piece? Unfortunately, probably quite a few. But I'm recycling them. You see, we've trapped quite a bit of carbon in the tree, and then we are recycling that tree into a different form of art from the one it existed in the wild. A large proportion of wood these days is from sustainable forests and things. So that's inevitably things are in quotes harmed, but yeah. Just turning them into a different form of beauty. And actually the brown, just since it sort of has come up, whilst pyrography is known as wood burning, I'm not actually burning the wood. I am actually cooking the sap of the wood. That's in the wood fibres. The heat of this tool is drawing that liquid out of the wood fibre and is actually cooking it, turning it brown. It becomes more like a varnish, and then that's left on the surface of the wood, which is where the brown colour comes from. So effectively it's all natural. This is plywood, by the way. It's not a solid piece of wood, so I don't actually know what the core is made out of, but the two surfaces are birch plywood. It's birch is the surface wood. So as I'm doing this, I'm applying a texture. The way in which the wood reacts to the heat is to shrink away from it, and it's creating a texture. You can actually run your finger over this and can feel the texture, and in doing so the light is bounced off that texture, and it actually makes it look in stream don't see it quite so much, but in actual real life here it actually closely resembles what a cat fur actually looks like. So I'm just going down the back of the pussycat here. So whilst this probably looks like I'm close to finishing, we're probably about halfway through this piece. Probably about another 4 or 5 hours worth of work. One of the things to be done is the background has all to be effectively a colour applied to it. We generally tone it down like this one here. Otherwise what tends to happen is the wood will tend to look dirty, whereas if we apply a little bit of colour to it in the background, it has two useful things. One is it makes the white fur on the cats look whiter, or look as though it is white, as opposed to some sort of brilliant colour, which on this one here on Felix the white is a bit too brilliant at the moment and doesn't necessarily look as realistic as it might do. But the other thing that it quite often does with these sorts of pieces is tends to make them look a bit like old photographs, which have gone sepia toned with age, which can actually be a very sort of pleasing effect as well. Whereas if it's left white like the background of this is, you don't get that overall effect of sepia toning, so it's kind of a little bit of a jarring effect. Is this tool hot enough to start a fire? As it is at the moment, no. Well, I'll say no, because tissue paper, well, this isn't tissue, but this is kitchen paper, for example. I'll hold that on for a little bit. It's actually just burnt through, really. So it's charred it, but as you saw, there's no flames. It's actually not hot enough to set paper on fire. Whether it would be hot enough to set on fire, I don't know, cotton wool, something like that, I've never tried. But generally speaking, no, this tool at this temperature isn't. I can turn this up quite a bit, and I can actually make it glow orange. It's not hot enough then even to set the wood on fire. The wood will just char and shrink away from it. With sufficient material, I guess it might be possible, but it's actually really quite hard to do that. It is hot enough to burn me. Again, no fire. I'm not putting my hands anywhere near it. It's probably around 200 degrees Celsius, roughly. Is that, and that's more than hot enough to do what I'm trying to do with it here. So I have no need to run it any hotter than that. Some artists do prefer to use these tools glowing, and they can work with them in that way. It's not how I prefer to work with them. And to some extent, the different art forms or the different way of producing images comes into that as well. To use a tool that's too hot or is very hot, you have to work either extremely fast or you work in less range of shades. So you might work in just a black and white, so real black, or black or not coloured at all. So line art, that sort of thing. Writing is sometimes done like that. Where you want to get lots of apparent colour, range of shades, then generally speaking you're using a cooler tool and you build the shade up in layers, one over the top of the other. Is it possible to achieve other colours? Base pyrography on its own, you achieve whatever colour the wood will give you. As you heat it up, it goes from a very light, very light, almost dirty looking around here, for example, and it gets darker. Your eyes and your brain can actually fool you though sometimes. A lot of people, and you may or may not see it, but a lot of people will swear that the inside of the eyes here around the pupils is a yellow or a greeny colour. It's actually a brown, but your eye, because of the colours that are around it, sometimes, or your brain will sometimes interpret that as a yellow or a light green colour. So there's the optical illusion style. What you can also use is like an ink stain, or actually ink for that matter, or alcohol based colour, and you can put that on the wood and then you can apply, so it's more or less stain the wood, and you can apply pyrography over the top, or that over the top of pyrography, and you can get coloured effects that way as well. So it's just a slightly different art form. Not cleaning the tip very often. At this stage is because it's kind of the shape, it's kind of the burning technique, and it's kind of the fact that there isn't a lot of stuff there to clean off it. The first pass through the wood, as I say, we're drawing out the liquid and we're cooking that, and that sticks to the surface of the wood, and there isn't the first pass through, there isn't generally a lot of that. And so whatever's on the tool is effectively, because it's like a liquid, or it's like sticky treacle, if you like, golden syrup, jam, that sort of thing, and you're effectively wiping it off as you go on. You're spreading it out, so the tool is kind of self-cleaning. When I'm doing stuff like really dark here, I'm holding this particular tool really flat. Again, it's kind of self-cleaning, even though I'm getting quite a dark colour and I'm actually applying quite a lot of heat. When I come, as I'm starting to do here now, and come over this more than once, then and I'm holding this tool at an angle rather than flat, I am now starting to scrape off some of the colour that's underneath, and also little tiny slivers of wood, because there is a texture underneath there. And just as I move the tool over, I'm not getting exactly in the same lines every time, so I'm dragging a little tiny slivers of wood off, which then sit on the tool, as it's just moving in sort of slight different angles, and they gradually heat up, and the liquid either cooks for long enough to carbonize, or the little tiny bits of wood will carbonize, and then that's the time when I need to then wipe the tool off and clean it. So it's kind of just the stage I'm at, and the techniques that I'm doing, which cause me to need to clean the edge or the bottom of the tool. Different tools will react in different ways, though. Writing tools like this one, which tend to actually, on a softwood, will tend to dig in quite a bit. They quite often pick up more of the stuff, for want of a better description, and generally they run hotter as well, because you're trying to get quite a dark line. So they will often build up quite a lot of debris, which then has to be cleaned off. And you might, with something like this, you might use like a small wire brush, something like that. But it can also be done with paper as well. So it really also has there's a dependency on the tool as well as the technique and things. But you generally can feel it from the point of view of the colour isn't quite coming as you want it to, or if you actually do get a carbon deposits on the tool. Carbon is quite hard, relatively speaking, and you can feel it scraping. So you just clean it out then. Yes, it is. It's the resin. That's the resin is what you're actually cooking. That's what's actually going brown. And so depends on what you're trying to do as well. If you're trying to spread out that colour, then the fact that you've got it on the bottom of your pen sort of helps. And you probably, if you were using something like a shader like this and really trying to spread it out, as I've been trying to do around here, then I'm not cleaning it as often as I am, as I say, doing like the fur and stuff. So and pine does give you a lot of resin. It dries out quite a bit, which is why you have it shrinking away from you as well. This one isn't bad. Different woods give you, that resin sap, different words for the same thing really. I don't actually know 100% what to actually call it, but different woods give you different effects in that way. The hardboard, which you've seen, I've shown you on stream, there's not quite as much resin sap or that liquid in it. It's proportionally quite a lot harder, but that you do pick up more of the wood, because hardboard is made up of effectively sawdust which has been glued together. So You know, it's as you're moving the pen over any slight imperfections or edge of the pen, you're actually picking up that surface a lot easier. And so with the hardboard, I'm cleaning my pen off a lot more. And if I was using the soldering iron style of tool, they run a lot hotter, and so the deposits you get on those tend to need cleaning off more if you're trying to create images with it. If you're using it more like a brand, then it generally doesn't make as much of a difference. Yeah, it can. It shrinks. So with something like that, you're probably better actually turning the heat down and doing. I know it's difficult to write over the top of something you've already written, but doing it in a couple of passes, maybe on a softwood especially. And as you say, it kind of disappears. It disappears away from you, and it can look a bit odd at times, not very cleanly done. But oxide powder, never ever had a need really to do it. You've seen most of the time I just wipe it on paper. A brass brush, yeah, it's softer. The oxide powder though strikes me as being quite a rough thing. That you should actually just. Oh, I see what you mean. If you use a very light, very fine oxide powder, so you're polishing it. You should just be able to use the leather itself, but there again, don't forget the leather is very likely to give you, if you're not careful, will give you because you'll be applying pyrography to the leather, so that will give you you know, material and stuff on your tip as well. Yeah, the brass is a relatively soft material, so relatively, that is. So I wouldn't have thought it would particularly ruin your pen, but as I say, generally speaking, you don't really need to do it too much. I mean, quite literally, sometimes what I do with this is I'll just take a craft knife and drag it, not cut it, but drag it. So I'll just show you what I mean. If I can find my scalpel behind me. There we go. And I only ever do this on this tool. I don't need to do it on any other. Excuse me, I think this has just got wrapped around my tripod. So all I'll do is just take the knife this way and just drag it off like that, and that really is enough most of the time to take any of the material that's on it off. In fact, I can see it's just taking a little tiny. Yeah, it's a little bit. It's a bit like it's got smoke on it at the moment. And as I do that, it's cleaning it off. I've never needed to try and get in underneath here or anything like that, so that's always been enough for just that. Never really had to try any polishing compound or anything on it. But you know, as we were talking about before, you look after your tools, they'll last a long time and they'll do the job that you want them to. So you know, if you've looked at it and you know your polishing compound is not too aggressive, then yeah, it looks like it would do the job. Oh, after you've cleaned it down, okay, yeah. Yeah, the leather will be certainly when it's cool. The leather's enough to do it. I generally, as you've seen, I do it. I don't think I've ever. Maybe the writing pen. Yes, I've done after it's been cooled down. I mean, it's never a good idea to start poking around a hot tip like that with anything like a scalpel or anything. So it is a good idea to cool it down. But I mean, you've seen me there do it on paper. Often enough, I just generally. All of these burn marks on here, by the way, are just demonstrations to people. Normally, if I do it, there's this. Yeah, I just wiping the residue that's on the bottom off, and generally the first wipe will take off anything, and then just a couple more, and it's perfectly clean now. And this is just kitchen paper. I don't set anything on fire on there, so yeah, the fine powder. Yeah, I realised what you after a few moments what you meant by that. Yeah, well, that's actually a medical scalpel, but yeah, it's exactly the X-Acto knife, same thing. It's just scalpel blades. Well, it's medical scalpel, but because it's not sterilised when I bought it, it's not a medical scalpel, if you see what I mean. Actually, who makes them? Swan and Morton are the manufacturers of those. So I know these days medically most of the time they tend to use plastic, but Swan Morton, their scalpel blades, again, they're not they've not been irradiated, so they're not when you buy them they're not sterilised, so they're not sold as medical scalpels, but it is essentially just the same. Well, it is the same. The only difference when these are used medically is they're irradiated to sterilise them. But I just like the weight and the feel of this as opposed to an X-Acto blade. Same idea on the end, but it's just I find a better balance with it. I actually also find the one thing, actually the other reason why I use these is I've got a nice secure, I don't know if you can see, but it's the blade sort of slots over the top of a keyway here. It's held really secure, it won't pull out, it won't slip or anything like that on the tool itself. With the X-Acto blades, because it's like a jaw that clamps down, I have had them move sometimes, and I don't like sharp objects that move of their own accord. That's another reason why I like the scalpel blades. But one member of my family was a radiographer, and she used to give me a scalpel occasionally, a real scalpel occasionally that for whatever reason was no longer usable. And so that's I sort of got those before I ever got my first X-Acto blade, so that's probably why I've just got used to them. Do I use it for carving? Very rarely. I mean, it's got a really sharp tip on it, especially with a new blade, so if I really want it to do some really fine detail, then yes, I get that to use for carving. But you have to be really careful, because the scalpel blades are sharp for a start, really sharp, obviously, because that's what they're designed to cut skin. But they're not very strong. I don't know if you can see that I'm bending that blade, so they're not very strong in a lateral direction. They're only ever really any good for cutting, literally just the cutting action. I really wouldn't want to use them in a paring action at all, because if you start digging into the wood and want to start to pull out of it, you're starting to twist this blade, and it will snap really easily. And even when you're cutting it, if you cut off and sort of push off to one side, which is fairly easy to do if you're not careful, the blade will snap, and then you drag a broken blade across, or you can, well, it's just potentially you could end up harming yourself, shall we say. So I really only use this literally for cutting rather than carving. But if I had a really tiny detail, I don't know. If I took something like this and I wanted to just carve an eyelid in there, which as you can see would be really tiny, this being a cat's face. Actually, there its ears. But if I wanted to carve an eyelid in, it's so tiny that I couldn't do that with any of my chisels. So then, yes, I'd probably use the scalpel for that. Well, of course, I think you said you'd ordered a set of chisels, I think, didn't you, Lizard Soul? The larger ones, so just keep your hands away from the front, from the cutting edge, and you will become more comfortable with it. I certainly have done so. The trick is not to become complacent with it. You have to remember they are really sharp and they don't care what they cut. That's they have no feelings. They've got no no inherent restrictions on cutting what they'll cut. So you have to remember to to give them the respect, and it will come. When I first got the chisel, I was extremely careful, shall we say, about making sure my hand was here and the chisel was there, if you like. It was in front, always the chisel was always in front of my hand, always pointing away from me. And I would always put the chisel down before doing anything. You've noticed on stream that I don't always put the chisel down. I do tend to talk with it in my hand. But this one's usually tucked away to one side when I'm doing that. It comes with practice. I still, as you hear me say on the stream many times, respect the chisels. These are sharp, and it just comes with time. As you learn how to control them, you become more confident with them. Yeah. Oh, it's not only skin you can cut. When I say it will cut anything, I mean what's underneath it as well. Chisel will go through bone just as to get really gory. The chisel will go through bone as easily as it will go through wood and skin. It's very easy. Yeah, it's weird, isn't it? But in actual fact, the chisels are potentially more dangerous to you than the scalpel is. Because if you're using a scalpel and you try doing something silly with it, shall we say, it will tend to snap. The blade will. A chisel blade will not snap. You can't do much to a chisel blade that'll cause it to snap. So, the chisel will keep going where the scalpel will stop. But the scalpel is extremely sharp, and it's probably a new one is probably sharper than chisels. I'll freely admit that it's but keep your hands away from. I mean, a chisel or a scalpel will cut you. This tool will burn you. So I suppose that's a useful pairing, isn't it? If you cut your finger, you can cauterize it, but and that's a joke, by the way, for anybody that's watching. Don't do either, really. But yeah, any tool of any kind, if it's used in the wrong way, is can be harmful. A sewing needle. Getting into the gory stuff now, I once stood on a sewing needle. It went right through my big toe. Came out the top. And it tickles like mad when you pull the thread through. Makes me wonder why clothes aren't always laughing. But it tickled like mad. And a needle. you know, little tiny needle you wouldn't think is particularly dangerous. Yeah, as you say, more force to a chisel as well. So, shall we leave the gory subjects alone? Perhaps talk about the wonderful objects that chisels and things like that can produce. We're probably scaring some of the viewers off with all this blood and stuff. What sort of pieces would you like to produce with your carving, lizard cell? A lot of my art, despite the fact that I'm doing pussycats, a lot of my art tends to be objects. I'm not fantastic. Well, I'm not bad at people's faces, monochrome faces, as you know, with airbrushes and things like that. Not sure I'd be. Well, I am actually practicing a statue for carving. So, you know, that's the back of a statue for carving. So I'm practicing being able to do that. It's not very good, but it's the first time I tried. I have a tendency to say, I can't carve a pussycat. So, as you saw, I've got a pussycat that I'm trying to carve. Not quite sure what it is that I'm most interested in doing though. Lots of people do, Lizard Soul. Lots of people do cringe at that. I never felt a thing. Okay, that's an interesting subject. Fossil reproductions, I guess. Yeah, trilobites. Yeah, and you've got the option then to do sort of, I guess, fictitious type stuff as well. That looks like it. That's an interesting question. One I can't answer, but what I would say is develop the skill, and then you might be surprised what people are interested in buying. I wouldn't suggest trying to find something which is commercially viable and then work out how to do it. Because for a start, by the time you've got good enough, fashion may have moved on and people are buying something different. But the other thing about selling art is or objects, well, a couple of things about selling them. One is it's very hard to make money in doing it. I mean, for example, this is this piece, when it's finished, like Junior, 20 hours. A commercial rate for something like that, you would be talking about £400-500. Delight. Thank you very much for following. I'm glad you're enjoying the stream, and welcome. Feel free to join in the conversation if you would like to do so, or if you want to just lurk in the background, that's okay as well. But it would be really difficult to sell something like this for 400 UK pounds. So carving's a similar thing as well. Carving takes quite a long time to do, and people don't necessarily realise that, and therefore don't value it according to the level of work that's done. To some extent, people will value it against mass-produced items which are maybe moulded, or they're done using CNC machines, and therefore it's a difficult market to make money in. A lot of art is the same as well. but also the other difficulty is getting to that market, and it's kind of like people don't just turn up and just start throwing money at you for something. Occasionally that might happen, and it's a very perhaps a wonderful thing, but it takes quite a long time to build up a reputation where people will pass on recommendations, or like streaming on Twitch, for example, or maybe going on to places like Etsy and selling pieces. It takes time to build up their reputation, so you've got a long time to practice doing all sorts of things. And sometimes the things that you might think nobody's really interested in at all will be the things that sell. Okay, well, I'm quite happy to explain, and I probably will go into a little bit of spiel in a little bit delight if you're not understanding of what it is you're seeing, so I'll quite happily explain that in just a moment. Yes, that is as well. Lizard Soul. When you start having to do it, it can be different, especially if you have deadlines. Yeah, and especially if you say something you don't like. Yeah. No, that's certainly is good advice, and find something you like doing, and it may well turn into something financially viable. So, Delight, what you're actually seeing is an art form called pyrography. It's the translation of the word, because it's sort of a Greek Latin type base, is literally fire writing. The pyro being the fire, and the graphy is writing, but very rarely is fire involved, and as you can see, this is more about creating an image. And I tend, therefore, and most people will understand pyrography really more as creating images using heat. We're not actually burning the wood either. What we're doing is this tool, which is electrically heated, it's about 200 degrees Celsius, is drawing the resin or the sap out of the wood fibres and is cooking it. If you're familiar with maple syrup, that's the sap of the tree, which is then drawn out and cooked, and it goes a nice golden colour, and in that particular case tastes nice. I don't know what this tastes like, I don't intend to go licking it, but it's a similar sort of thing. We're actually cooking it, which is what makes it go this brown colour, and then that sits on the surface of the wood and produces the colour. And then, depending on how long that heat's applied, depends on how dark the colour is that we actually get. But it's not a one-time process. I can and do go over an area more than once, and as I go over it a second time, I apply more heat and I cook that resin a little bit more, and it goes darker. So it's it's a multi-stage process. Different tools are used to do different things. I'm using something here, a tool which gets described as a shader, because it creates shades. There are other types of tools. I've got one here, for example. This is really just a loop of wire. This gets called a writing tool. It can be used for other things as well, but it's a bit like it's a sort of a bit like a ballpoint pen. And this one's cold, but you can use it for writing, for drawing lines, and a type of colouring which is called cross hatching, where you create lines and squares and things like that. The finer or the closer the lines are together, the darker it looks. So it's a way of shading things in. A different style of work to what I'm doing here. I'm also using this tool. I'm actually using the edge of this tool rather than the flat of it, and in doing so what I'm doing is creating a texture, and that texture looks rather like a cat fur here in real life. The camera tends to make it look a bit shiny more than anything, but it's here in person it's very like cat fur. And so all I'm really doing here is trying to represent the image of the cat that's in the bottom left of the screen there. That's the reference image. This is non-exact copy, it's close, but it's just how I have interpreted that particular picture. There are other ways of creating images in pyrography. There are artists which will use a blowtorch, which is a naked flame. Generally speaking though, they're doing that on really large sheets of wood, several feet long, because it's quite a, as you can imagine, it's quite a large tool. So the detail that you can get with it is correspondingly larger. You couldn't do a piece this size with a blowtorch, for example. There are also tools that look, most hobby shops do tend to sell them, that look more like a soldering iron. They're quite bulky, will have a silver barrel with a tip on the end. They can be used to create this sort of artwork. Personally I find them harder to hold. This I can hold like a pencil. The others are somewhat more bulkier, and you have to hold them further away from a tip. So if you ever try drawing with a pencil by holding it at the other end, that's why I prefer these for doing this sort of work. And there are also different styles of work that can be done. I try and have a photograph-like representation. Some people will do a style which is cartoon-like. Some people will use styles which are just black and white. And also you can just do geometric patterns and things like that. All sorts of materials get used. This is, well, wood is used a heck of a lot. This being birch wood. It's a plywood, but it's birch wood is the surface I'm applying this to. Other sorts of woods get used. Generally speaking, the lighter the wood the better. It allows you to have more tones. The darker the wood, the less tones you can get out of it. But you can also do this on leather. You can even do it on paper. Thick paper is better than thin paper, or card. You can do it on bone, and it can actually be done on ivory, but ivory is, you're not allowed to do anything with ivory these days. So in that particular case, ivory is what you will often see in museums with black images on them. Used to be done by sailors of the old wooden sailing ships a long time ago. I believe it gets called scrimshaw, and they used to do it with a sailmaker's needle on ivory. But it's also done on gourds as well, and generally for some reason images on gourds tend to be really popular in geometric patterns, but different, just a different form of the art. What you're seeing here is a monochrome art form. So this is a black and white cat, but I'm kind of not going black. Going too dark in colour actually doesn't necessarily give you a better image. Because your eye is looking at the contrast between things. So whilst this cat is almost black, it's a really dark brown, but it looks black. If I made him all black, it would be quite a boring picture to some extent, you wouldn't then see his eyes as being black. They'd look sort of a browny colour. You wouldn't particularly see his nose standing out like this as a black nose. So it's it's an art form of contrasts or comparisons between the different shades that you see. Yes, magnifying glass and sunlight, anything which produces heat. Well, yeah. If the sun's that hot, then it might not be very comfortable. Good evening, baby tears. Nice to see you again, and welcome back to the stream. We've got Delight maybe still around on stream as well, I trust, who was watching. And you've unplugged your headphones this evening already, I trust. I think that's the last time I'll mention it, so forget about it after this. I'm just doing the back now. This particular piece I almost abandoned at the beginning of this week. It really did not look very good, but the method in which I do these things is to do a pass over like you see me doing here, and then go over again and darken it down. When I first built this image, it really looked terrible and I could not get it to look right. And then at the beginning of this week I started just off stream darkening it down, and it started to look better, so it got a second chance. And it's coming along quite nicely. It's one of those things that I'm probably going to be quite proud of when I've finished. Okay. But you can't. Why can't you? Yeah, okay, can. That's better. Don't have too many. There's no point in getting drunk. There's no real fun. Well, I was going to say there's no real fun to getting drunk. I am prone to getting migraines, so I can have all the after effects of being drunk without actually the fun bit at the front. So I don't see much fun in having too much to drink. But by all means, sit back, enjoy the stream. We'll be around for a little bit longer yet. There are different techniques of creating the colour. I am particularly using this tool a little bit like a knife in some ways to create this fur-like texture, but equally it can be used flat to create a really different looking texture like the ears have been done here. And if you're interested in, anybody who's listening is interested in seeing more pyrography apart from, please come back and when I do my next piece, take a look on YouTube for an artist called Jean Buick. That's Jean, and the surname is Bouick. Most of what you'll see will be time lapse, but she is an absolute amazing artist when she does either animals or landscapes and buildings and things like that. But that's a very good artist to have a look at and see just what can be done with pyrography. Some really amazing images. Thank you very much, baby tears. Yeah, it's as I mentioned, I'm quite pleased with it. It's there's probably about another, at least another 4 or 5 hours on this though before it's I'll consider it complete. It's quite interesting. I follow a few artists on YouTube, of various kinds. Jean Buick is one of them, and because I'm interested in their art form, and quite interestingly, a few of them just seem to have released videos today. So there was, I think, one from Jean Buick from yesterday that I watched just recently, and another artist that I watch is Leslie Pike, who engraves glass, tankards, bottles, and lots of things. And she does some amazing artwork. I think the one I just watched today was a lion, a male lion with the mane, and that was an amazing thing. Oh. Yep, I was giving it. Yeah, that's right. Yes, maybe we ought to find a way to get rid of the buzz. I think, Baby Tears. What do you think? Yeah, I've got a little button that I'm sure would stop the buzzing. The buzzing that seems to have appeared in chat. Yeah, it's this circle thing with a line through it, and this. Just on the just next to the time. I'm sure that would work to get rid of the buzz. Yeah, as William, you're right. I was on Monday going to abandon the piece at the end of the stream. That's what I said. And after the stream, I was watching 3D Block, and whilst I was there, it was really just a case of, I can't do any harm, I'm just going to mess about with it. And I started making down here around his cheek and the side of his eyes really dark. I just experimenting to see how dark I could get it, and it started to look better. And then so I thought, well, I'll do the rest, and I started then on Tuesday and Wednesday darkening it down, and it just really started to look a heck of a lot better on each day. So it's earned its reprieve. And then yesterday I started on the ears, and that's improved it even more. So just something about this cat particularly, its face structure just changed when it was as dark as it was supposed to be. No. That my end of stream button actually says stop streaming. No circles and lines in there, William. What does it say if I hover my mouse? Oh, a little pop-up comes up that says ban. I wonder what that means. Should we experiment? Dear. Yeah, it's alright for me to tease. You've got to watch yourself, William. I've had my fun. It's done and dusted, as they say around here. Okay, this is first, so I should be doing it from this end and working backwards. Yeah. And it's quite long fur as well, so I should be doing fairly long strokes. Now to start with, I'm going to get lots of these sort of marks, darker marks. But as I go over it for the second time, a lot of those will vanish, and I've now got to adjust some of the texture on the top here because I've been doing too short. The marks have been doing too short. Again, not a problem because it's the first pass. The second pass, it starts to become more important. Second and third passes. I has the power. Yeah, am I only the streamer, I'm also the moderator. I've got two jobs at the same time. Who says you can't do two things at once? I seem to have scared William off. I think he's gone quiet. So what have you been up to today then, William? Baby T has had a bad day there, so I don't think she wants reminding of it. But I've had a fun day helping people out at work. Lots of people asking me questions about how to do stuff. Didn't get any of my own work done, but I helped lots of people. You mod for Lost. Not sure that's a recommendation, is it, William? What do I do? Mostly these days I deal with product statistics, sales, how many get sold, rates of decline, rates of increase, and all sorts of statistics to do with sales. Well, that's the best bit, playing with the dog at the end, isn't it? School's important though. I know while you're at school you probably don't feel that, but afterwards when you start needing a job and things like that, school is important. Unfortunately, a lot of people only find that out too late. Ow. The ow was then because my thumb was getting hot, whilst generally speaking, there's very it's a 200-degree tip. My hand isn't hot at all. It's like a candle. As hot air comes off the tip, and just in some places, it'll come up right into your finger. And it is really just like holding your hand over the top of a candle flame, an inch or two above a candle flame. And it's about the same sort of temperature that you'd feel if you did that, and it just becomes uncomfortable sometimes. I just generally say ow, which means to me that's a little bit uncomfortable. Move your thumb, you silly person. So it's kind of just like an exclamation more than an actual indication of pain. Rates of... didn't follow that one, William. I'm not sure I'd go back to school, baby tears. I mean, I enjoy the job I do, and I learn. I enjoy learning, so the job I'm doing is always learning and discovering stuff, and it's an adventure, to hark back to something I was talking about on stream earlier. But and of course there's different schools, universities and colleges as well. Oh, that's good. Lunar Nightmare 20, good evening and welcome to the stream. That's an unusual name, is that? Lunar Nightmare? I have done lecturing. I wouldn't actually say I was a teacher. I've not qualified as teaching or anything like that, but within the business that I work for, I spent about 3 years teaching people how to maintain small mainframe computers. So you remember quite well. It learnt quite a bit from doing that. Lecturing and teaching isn't what I would call the same thing. Lecturing is teaching people who want to learn. Teachers teach people who do not necessarily want to learn. Okay, so we've done one pass down there. I'm going to turn it over now. The way in which the texture is created means that the texture that's created is kind of like a V groove, and I've coloured one side of the V by turning the piece around, and I'll colour the other side, and it will actually make it go quite a bit darker really quickly because of that. Otherwise I'd be struggling to actually make the colour darken off if I carried on doing it with the wood the same way around. This bit at the top I've already sort of done that on once already, so this one won't be quite as dramatic, but when I get down to this bottom end here, it will take quite a bit of colour really quickly. And we may get down to that area on this stream, we shall see. Just adjusting the texture as well. I've tended to do it in little short hairs. In actual fact the back hairs are quite long, so I need to just lengthen the texture off a little bit. Trying to be fairly random about the placing so I don't create lines. Let's have a look at that. I prefer not to say, Baby Tears. It's one of the telecommunications companies in the UK. It might not be the one you first think of, but because there are actually hundreds, but it's a telecommunications provider. You might find it boring. I find it interesting. There are times when any job's boring, and I'm quite lucky in that I kind of define my own job. I get to shall I say, I get to investigate something that struck my interest and decide if it's worth pursuing further, and if it does, then I get to do more interesting, more interesting things with numbers. I know it sounds boring to some people, but it's a bit like a puzzle game. You can look at a set of figures, generally a graph, and there'll be something, there'll be a characteristic to that graph, a shape, and that shape is telling you something, and the trick is to work out what it's telling you. And sometimes it's not obvious, and sometimes what you're doing is you are looking at 2 or 3 graphs of slightly different things, and they'll have the same shape, and you'll go, well, there must be something. Well, there may be something about both of these that is similar, that may be interesting to use or for the business to make use of. And so you're looking at what it is that makes them similar. Is there something in it, or is it just pure coincidence? And it is very much like playing a game and investigating things. Yeah, sorry, Baby Teeth. I just don't want, it's a day job. I enjoy it very much, but I kind of, end of the day, it's done, and I don't particularly want to start to bring it into a stream. I don't want to end up with lots of questions about lots of things that I don't actually have anything to do with. Yes. Yeah, frequently, William. I mean, that's all part of it. It's and here I am talking about my job, but it's that's the trick, is to to work out if it's actually telling you something. So that's. I was just about to say, there's a lot of statistics involved, curves and things like that. So that's something that you kind of learn in school. It's not, I am not using any. I'm not specifically using anything that I learnt in school, but what I learnt in school does come into it, because it's things like knowing what a quadratic equation is and how it might get used. And knowing that you can use integration techniques to find the shapes of curves, or a formula that describes a curve, and that formula can tell you things. And it's all that sort of stuff. So it literally is. It's like a puzzle game. You're puzzling your way through it, and it sounds daft, but you get a feel for things. It's like art, in a way. You can look at something and you go, that's not quite right, it needs X. And me dealing with numbers is a bit like art. I have the skill that I've developed to look at something and go, there's something about that, either that's not right, or that is right, or there's something there that's worth investigating or looking at. And it's something that sounds boring, but actually turns out not to be, for me at least. And I'm sure there'll be lots of people that look at what I'm doing here in pyrography and go, that's boring, why on earth do you want to do that? It takes 20 hours to get this far, and quadratic formula, x to the 4 plus x to the 3 plus x to the 2 plus x to the 1 plus x, or z. That's kind of the formula, the structure of a quadratic formula. In my job, I then have to solve it for x. But in actual practice, I don't, because I use tools to do it for me. So, but knowing what it is and how you can use it is, whilst I've got tools to help me do it, you need to know which tool to use, or that is an appropriate tool to use at all. In some cases it's not. The sort of things that you learn at school. What's the difference between interpolation and extrapolation? That's an important thing to know, or to be able to relearn if you don't know it, in my job. So school is useful in that it's whilst you may or may not use what you learn, it teaches you how to learn, how to be inquisitive, if you like, and gives you knowledge of what's possible, so that afterwards you remember what's possible, or are able to work out for yourself what's possible because of the techniques that you learnt at school. But a lot of people will disagree with me, maybe. Quadratic equations. But it's like who was it earlier? Now you're being provocative, William. I was talking with Lizard earlier about him learning some woodworking skills in order for him to sell pieces, and whether pieces would sell. You learn at school about being able to create graphs and things, and Lizard, if he was truly wanting to make a business, he'd have to be able to use graphs to predict sales rates, to be able to determine profit and loss, break-even times and things like that. So again, maybe that's not something you learn in school, but you use the techniques, or you've got the grounding to do so. But the glass of water is for me to drink. I haven't been drinking much of it because I've also got a cup of cold tea here as well, which I'm now going to drink. I've never had a fire ever from using any tools or other craft capabilities. Any time I've had a fire was with a barbecue. And don't put aerosols in fires. That's a serious thing. I was about to say that's something else you learn in school, but I didn't learn that in school. I learned that in a job that I had before I started school, where an aerosol can had got into a fire and it exploded. And it landed several hundred feet away. So don't put aerosols in fires. This is going nicely. No, it particularly wouldn't very much, William, to be honest, because if you got on the desk, this is electrically heated tool. There's a mains power unit just over there. There's a computer screen over there. There's a graphics tablet over there. There's some mains power sockets just down here. Using water would actually be the last thing I would think of using. If this really did set on fire, the first thing I'd do would be that, and it'd probably go out. But more than likely, if it really was on fire, I wouldn't stay. I would probably actually just go get a wet towel if I was going to do it. Liquid water doesn't always help. Especially in a house. And if you're in a kitchen, don't use water. Use a damp cloth or a damp towel if you really need to use it on a fire and you don't have proper equipment. Do not, in kitchens, don't use water. Get that anywhere near fat and you actually make it worse. You know, I'm inclined to say you should apologise for that last statement, William. That's not really nice, is it? Either if you're talking about the person or if you were talking about real liquid. Just thinking, you learn about all sorts of things on this stream, don't you? Fire extinguishing techniques and profit and loss, integration, pyrography, carving, remote control, physical computing. Oh dear. And that's before we talk about whatever might have gone on in stream or on chat. I'm looking forward. I'm sure at some point I'm going to be asked to do the a third cat, which is kind of a tortoise shell, grey and dark grey type tortoise shell, and it's this technique which is sort of creating blotches of colour. Seems like it would suit that particular cat quite well, so kind of looking forward to when I do it. I think I might, next pyrography piece I might avoid the cat for a little while and do something else. I'm not sure yet what that will be, but it'll be another week or so before we're back to pyrography once this is done anyway, so plenty of time to decide. I know if it was you, William, or someone else suggested a lion's mane, a lion with a mane, or that might have been for the scraper board. Can't recall now, but that's another cat, so I might avoid that for a little while as well. Not sure. My memory's terrible. Yeah, outside the box. Everything I do is outside the box. So baby tears. I often deliberately will pick things that I am uncomfortable with doing, just to see if I can do them, and if not, to learn something from it. So I've done a fair number of cats. That's partly because my wife likes cats. So previously, before I was streaming, of course, then I would do pieces that she quite liked to have around as well. But just about, I am quite happy to try and tackle just about anything, really. So it's just to try and see and learn, and it's I mean, it helps if I'm familiar with the subject. It's like the practice railway engine. I liked the picture. I'd never done one before, so I tried that. Or the bomber that I did, the World War II bomber. I'd never done one of those before. Could sort of imagine doing all sorts of things, but just not quite sure what yet. I mean, feel free if there's anybody to suggest things. I don't mind suggestions. I'll think about it, and it really will be down to if it just piques my interest, then I'll do it, or maybe do it. Yes, that's correct. I am. Quite a number of years, more than 25. Which means I'm quite old as well. Yeah, good. I say, that's right. We're talking about anime, and the fact that I never watch particularly anime, so it's always difficult to know. So it'd be just picking something which I had no idea what it is, but or some of the other characters. None of the games I particularly play have characters in, apart from, well, I suppose they all have you or me, the player in. So Euro Truck Simulator's got a driver which is you, but you never see him. Minecraft has players' skins in it, I guess, but otherwise they'd have to probably watch a lot of streams, World of Warcraft or something, and then the problem is there's copyright on the images. May have to just make something up then. I do not believe that in the slightest, baby tears. Ah, dear. Almost as old as Lost and 3D. I'm older than 3D is. He's a youngster. And yes, and I think you're right there, baby tears. What, 73 days, William? Months? Uh, you, there is copyright, but there's a sort of a slight loophole which is called fan art, and there is also a thing which is, if I wasn't streaming, and 3D will probably certainly tell you the same thing, if I wasn't streaming and I just do it for myself, then at best it's called fan art, and the ideal thing is to take that as an inspiration and perhaps reinterpret the character, so it's not a copy. Maybe different hairstyle, different coloured skin, slightly different clothing. So it's similar, but it's different. Streaming it and selling it, you're getting closer and closer towards actively breaking copyright, because even if I do it for myself, technically it is a copyright copyright and breaking copyright. I'm trying to think of the words. Feels like should start with a V, but I can't. I am actually breaking copyright even if I do it for myself. So but once you start to potentially gain monetary advantage from doing it, like if you make it to sell, if you've made it and somebody buys it, yeah, that's a grey area, as Free will probably say. If you actually make it with the intention of selling it, then you are definitely copyright is definitely involved in that. But yeah, the selling bit, William, is really it's a way in which the courts and use it as an easy way to determine whether copyright has been broken. I mean, the intention of copyright is that the owner of the work, the image, the art, whatever it is able to use that for his or her own financial advantage. So in a lot of copyright cases, the purpose of the case is to show that the person that owns the copyright has lost money by somebody else doing something that's and they've made money out of it. So money is used as an indicator, but really copyright is literally that. It's copying somebody else's work, no matter whether money's made out of it or not. It's just that most copyright owners are less bothered if you've just done it to put on your own wall. You don't sell it or anything like that, and to some extent they've got no real way of knowing that you've done it. But that doesn't mean that you're still not breaking copyright. If I do something on stream, then there is a way in which people can see that I've done it, and it's would I like it if somebody took this image, turned it into a poster and sold 1 million of them? No, I wouldn't like that. I wouldn't like them doing that to me, so why would I do it to somebody else? Whether I sell 1 or 1,000. 3D sells his, yes, but 3D doesn't actually make. Well, ask him. I mean, he's either done a piece for himself and then somebody's come along and bought it, which is it's in the grey area, or as he says himself, he changes it. It's inspired by, so it looks in the style of, but it's not actually a thing. Don't want to do it. I don't want to copy somebody else's image, but I don't mind using it as a reference. So it will, it might have a might look somewhat like it, but you know, you might get away with it, William. It's like I don't know, speeding in the UK. You know, lots of people do it. Doesn't mean it's actually legal. It just depends on the person, I guess, as to whether or not they want to take that risk. Okay, well, I will take a snapshot now of this a conversation, because you've just given me permission to use that picture. There you go. Sometimes it's your image, so I'm assuming it's your image. I haven't actually checked, but assuming it is your image that you have used in your profile, then you've just given me permission to use it, so I could do so. Well, maybe I will. It might be an interesting thing to do. Right, well, I have stopped. I've stopped doing pyrography and started talking again. So I'm just going to do a little bit more. It might be an interesting thing to do, actually. Baby tears is do some people's avatars if it's their own image as opposed to one borrowed from somewhere else. I may well consider doing that. I shall take a look later on after the stream. It certainly would be a challenge. I've not done too many portraits well, I've only done one portrait in Scraperboard, so monochrome images there's some images work better than others. I mean, for example, of course, the Scraperboard I did was somebody on stage. Generally, somebody on stage with a spotlight on them it makes a good monochrome image because of the way the lighting is. Whereas, a bright sunlit scene isn't always a good monochrome image because there's not a lot of contrast involved. Okie dokie. Well, we've done one or two passes there on the back of this pussycat. I think that'll be all the pyrography I do on tonight's stream now. It's getting a little bit warm around here. Let me turn the pyro machine off. So I'm going to take some of this cold water. Okay. If I make millions though, you want 20%. Oh, you already gave me permission to use your image freely, baby tears. So don't know about that. Got to watch your contracts. You see, you created a contract in some ways, but lol kid lol. Actually, that's interesting. Because at the point where I was really unsure earlier this week, that it looked like at one point it looked like a fox and it looked like a bear. After a little bit more work, and then it now looks like a cat to me because I know what it's supposed to look like. It's one of our cats. The nose is a little bit off, and that's possibly what's making it look like a fox. But it is supposed to be a cat. Now, if I actually make millions out of it, baby tears, then if I make millions, then yeah, I'd probably give you some of it. I do say probably because that way I'm not creating a contract. Dear. Well, what temperature? It's actually, we're at 26 degrees in the studio Celsius. That's probably about 82 in Fahrenheit, somewhere around there. So it is quite warm in here. Some of that is a big 300 watt uplighter I've got next to me, but it's actually quite warm work. Even though these tools are only 10 or 15 watts, and your computer screen in front of you, wherever you are, is giving off more heat than that. It's quite localized around me here, because you don't have a lot of air blowing around in the house. So it actually does get quite warm where you are, just the same as if you were to lean over a monitor for quite a time. And the left here, left, do you mean his left as in this one, or left as in this one? Kelvin would be 299 degrees Kelvin. Actually, I shouldn't say degrees. 299 Kelvin. So there you go. So that's this one then. Okay. I suppose it probably would be, yes. I mean, it actually is. The bottom of the screen on the left there, lolkid, is the image that I'm sort of working with. So perhaps I've just made it a bit wide. I suspect the kink in it, which is tends to be a fox-like, but interesting. I can certainly see why you'd say it's got a fox-like resemblance both to the ear and the nose. It's too late in the piece now to make any major changes to it to correct that. But the person it's my wife who will sort of receive this will does instantly recognise it as our cat. So, but interesting that somebody else has said the fox-like. I think, I know the nose isn't quite right, and that's probably giving some of that image away, and probably if it wasn't doing that, the ear would be less noticeable in that respect. But it's interesting that whenever you do an animal, if you get the markings right of it, or approximately right, people will recognise it. That know the animal will recognise it, and they'll actually say it's a really good likeness, even if you've got quite a lot of else of the image wrong. And it's the marking. So as soon as they recognise it, they impose their own view on top of the image, and it looks a lot better. It's an amazing thing to see when people do that. Yeah. Okay. Part of the trick with any of this is to kind of inject that 3D, and it's a little difficult with ears to some extent, because they're generally or animal ears, because they're generally very dark. With two-dimensional pictures like this, the darker the colour, the further into the background it tends to look, and the lighter the colours, the more to the foreground it tends to look, which is kind of why this sort of appears to stick out and the ears appear to go in. But it's a funny thing, because in a landscape, the darker stuff is at the front and the lighter stuff is at the back, and it's a weird thing when you start doing animals or close-ups how things change. Interesting. It's always interesting to hear how other people look at an image and interpret it, and how they see it. Don't need to be sorry, lolkid. Saying how you, as I just said, it's interesting to me to see and understand how people see things, and as you said, it looked like a fox, and I'd actually said the same thing to earlier on this week. And my thought was it was the muzzle here, and I never considered the ear at all as contributing to that. I mean, at one point I think I said it looked a bit like a bear. At the time, the ears weren't there at all; they were just blank, and so you kind of just saw the well, it was as though the ears weren't there, if you see what I mean. So you just saw the head, and it looked very much like a bear. And that sort of look only went away for me once I put the ears in. Lol Kid, thank you very much for following as well. That's most kind of you. I'm glad you're enjoying the stream and want to join in and come back. That's great. Thanks, William. I'm not actually. It's pointed here. I'm not fantastically as happy with this one's. Not so bad. I'd have liked it to be darker, but I've tried pushing it a little bit, and it's near enough to what I'm after. But I would have liked it to be darker. This one isn't quite. I'm probably going to go revisit this one a little bit. You may or may not be able to see it, but there's a nice sort of rich brown here, which I'd love to get into this ear, certainly around the edges, and darken just the interior off at the moment. It's almost the same shade as the fur. Now I know the fur is black, or extremely dark brown actually, but there is actually a quality difference, and I can't quite say what it is, but and some of its expectation that the inside of the ear should, if it's black, should be blacker than the outside. Now that's a bit against what an artist usually says, in that you draw what you see or paint what you see, not what you think. And when I see this, the inside of the ear is more or less the same colour, so it's right from what I see from the reference image. And I'm going to use a word which is scan. As your eyes fall over, look over the piece, which is the scan. It doesn't scan right. When you look over it, there's something about that ear which says it's not right to me. And what I'm thinking of is it's the colouring that's not quite right. The inner ear here should be darker than it is. I'm not necessarily saying. I think what I'm saying to myself is the difference between this colour and this colour is not correct. They look to be the same shade. Now if you look at the reference image, if you can just see it, it's a bit over there. Yeah, that way. The inner ear is somewhat of a lighter brown colour, which is lighter than this, and I think that's probably what it is. I think what I'll probably need to do is darken the around here more, around the edges of his ears, because to some extent I'm looking at a larger version of it. This it starts really dark and tapers off, and then there's this coffee brown colour just on this side here. I think probably I haven't darkened enough of the ear to leave this centre colour as just like a highlight, if is the way of describing it. It will be a smaller patch, and I think that's probably what's throwing it off to me, but no, never mind. A bit like that, yeah. And on the picture in the middle of the head, it's brighter than on the sides. That's right. Yeah, and that's the light which is coming. There's a light sort of over the top of him. So this area is a little bit more shiny. It's got like a white cast on it, and it's actually sort of a V shape. I'm not likely to try and represent it. I mean, you can see this side's probably slightly darker, and down here is darker. if I try too hard to create that white bloom that's on the top, which is really means darkening the areas around it, I probably wouldn't achieve much of a difference, or enough to spend a few hours doing that. I think to do it on stream, certainly I'd probably bore you guys silly, because what I'd have to do is just this whole area here I'd have to darken off at least another shade. And actually, now interesting that you say it, lol kid, I might actually do that, because if I darken this section off, which will create that slightly lighter area on his head here, because it's all about the difference between the two shades, and this area here has got a dark shade here across this side. So if I darken across from the tip of this white bit here towards the ear and this section here, it will make this look lighter, and it will also make this area darker than here. And if you can see on the reference image, this is supposed to be lighter than this. So I might actually do that. Interesting idea. So thank you for mentioning it. Yeah, that's the other key thing, lol kid, is eyes, and I generally do them first, because if you don't get them right, scrap the piece and start again. If you don't get the eyes right, they're a little bit bright, but they're not too bad, because he's kind of a bright-eyed cat, if you know what I mean. I'm using to us here, it looks that's his kind of style, a bright-eyed cat. He often has his eyes wide open like a kitten, and but they're probably a little bit light. Trying to think what his eye colour is. I think it's a mid-green sort of colour, so they're probably a little bit light, but it gives that wide open eye look, which is representative of his personality. But yeah, I love eyes. You get them right, and it's eyes. Well, I said the markings early. Eyes and the marking. The rest, that's details. Get those right, and they really stand out. And the trick is to make them look wet. Dear. The eyebrows. Yeah, I guess you are seeing those on stream, aren't you? I know what you mean by the well, I'm assuming you mean the moustache around here. That's actually what his markings are. So, and of course that's his chin down here and the moustache. Yeah. Eyebrows, yeah. If I darken this area off here, the eyebrow that you're seeing certainly here there will disappear. And now that you've pointed it out to me, I can see it on the outgoing stream. It could do with a bit of work to do. So yeah, that's a good one. No. Have I misinterpreted where you were intending to point at? The always surprised cat. He often is like that. The long hair. The long hair. No, I don't understand. I meant the long hair. You mean the whiskers on the brows? Oh, sorry. You're meaning like on this picture here. You're meaning these lines that go up here and off the side. Yeah, the white hair. Yeah, the whiskers. I will be doing that, yes, but I'm going to do it when I finish. There's only two ways of having light colours with pyrography. One is like I've done here, if you like, which is to avoid colouring it. Now, to avoid colouring those fine hairs on the face would take a heck of a lot of work to avoid them, and just one slip and they're gone. What I'm going to do once the whole piece is finished, apart from those whiskers, so once I've applied a background colouring, once I've done some more colouring around the white areas here, because it's a little bit too white at the moment, and around the outside here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a scalpel like this, and then I'll actually scrape away the brown and leave the lighter wood underneath, which will then show the whiskers up, and I can create quite a fine line, and I don't have to worry about accidentally going over it or trying to leave just a white spot left, so they'll come right at the end. Okay, have a good night, baby tears. I'm actually winding the stream up myself anyway, so you're not about to miss anything, but thank you for dropping in. That's great, and I'll maybe I'll take a look at the image. We'll see. Get back to you. Yeah, so the whiskers will get done as the last thing, and then once I'm happy with everything else, then they'll get put in, and as they're the last thing, I won't have to avoid them to correct something else that's there that I've missed or something like that. Okay, so we'll do some more of this on the stream tomorrow with the body. Most likely finish the body tomorrow on the stream. Do some shading, more shading around the face here. This, as I say, this white area is probably a little bit too bright. Some of the shading is subtle, but it won't show up, so I'll be a little heavy-handed in the shading, very much like on Junior. Junior here is a white cat as well, so we exaggerate the shading a little bit, so it actually shows up and contributes to the image. And that's probably all we'll get through on the stream, but we may just get to doing the background area as well. But that's it for this evening. The advert comes now, which is of course, as Lol Kid and a few other people have done tonight. If you're interested in seeing more of this, please follow, and hopefully Twitch will tell you when I go live, especially if you remember to let it tell you. Say yes, I'd like notifying, please. Then hopefully it'll tell you. But in case it doesn't, you can follow me on Twitter at Zaragonart. Just below the stream is the details. And about the only thing I tweet is when I go live. So I'm not gonna inundate you with tweets. If you want to follow me, and those tweets do seem to be reliable in when I go live. Apart from that, everybody, thank you very much for watching. It's been great fun having you around. I hope you have enjoyed what you've seen, and would like to come back and see more pyrography or carving or scraper board or whatever else we decide to do next. It's now 10:30 in the UK. I generally start streaming around about 2.5 hours ago. So wherever you are now, 2.5 hours back is about when I stream. Generally 7 nights a week at the moment. So look forward to maybe seeing you on another stream. Have a good evening, and see you later.